The auction yard was alive with a restless energy, a heavy mix of sweat, dust, and greed hanging in the hot afternoon air. The sun bore down mercilessly, turning the wooden boards of the platform into something that looked as if it could scorch. Bare skin, men in wide-brimmed hats and worn boots pressed closer to the stage, their voices low and hungry, their eyes trained on the figure at the center of attention. She stood there barefoot, wrists bound before her with a frayed length of rope, the coarse fibers biting into her skin. Her buckskin dress was torn at the hem, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, but nothing could dim the fierce dignity in her dark eyes. She didn't shrink from their stares. She met them head on, as if daring them to see her as something more than the prize they thought she was. Long black hair lifted in the wind, framing a face that refused to break. The auctioneer, a weary man with a voice that cracked like a whip, called out numbers in a rapid-fire chant, his hands slicing through the air. This here is the last Apache woman in the territory, he bellowed, stoking the crowd's frenzy. Strong as they come, smart, and he grinned with a glint of cruelty, worth every damn dollar. The bids began, each one louder and more eager than the last. 50, 75, 100. Some men chuckled under their breath, speaking in tones too low to catch but enough to send shivers crawling up the spine. At the edge of the gathering, Levi Carson sat tall in the saddle of his bay gelding. The brim of his hat cast his face in shadow, but the set of his jaw was clear, sharp, hard, and unyielding. Levi had a reputation in these parts, one that preceded him into every saloon and every dusty trail camp. He was a man who got what he wanted and never gave more than a curt word to anyone. People said his heart was made of the same dry stone that dotted the land. But today, as his eyes locked on the woman on the platform, something stirred inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, an ache, a pull, a sense that if he turned away now, he'd carry the weight of it forever. She wasn't just another soul caught in the ruthless machinery of men. Greed, she was a fighter, even in chains. The bidding climbed higher. A loud rancher in a red shirt shouted one number. A gambler with a whiskey slur countered it. Levi's hand twitched on the reins, then, in a low voice that cut through the noise like the crack of a rifle, he spoke his number. It was higher than any sane man would offer. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, then broke into murmurs. Heads turned, eyes narrowing, wondering why the infamous Levi Carson had any interest in this auction. Some smirked knowingly, assuming his reasons were no different from theirs. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. This was the bid that would seal it. Sold, he barked, slamming the gavel down with a thud. Levi urged his horse forward through the parting crowd. He swung down with easy, controlled movements, his spurs jingling softly against the dry earth. Without ceremony, he took out his knife and sliced through the ropes at her wrists. The rope fell to the ground, and she rubbed her chafed skin, her gaze never leaving his face. There was no gratitude in her eyes, only suspicion. He didn't offer a smile or a word of comfort. Instead, he simply nodded toward his horse. She hesitated, scanning the faces around her, leering, hostile, eager to see what he would do. Finally, she stepped forward, and with a quick, practiced move, he helped her onto the horse. Levi mounted behind her, the crowd still murmuring, watching them ride away. Dust rose under the gelding's hooves, curling in the hot air. As the auction yard faded into the distance, Levi didn't look back. He had no intention of explaining himself to anyone. The truth was simple. He hadn't bought her to own her. He'd bought her to save her. Though he suspected she wouldn't believe that, not yet. And he knew that what lay ahead was going to be far more dangerous than the moment they had just left behind. They rode for miles without a word. The only sounds the steady rhythm of the gelding's hooves and the low whisper of the wind. Through the sagebrush, the sun was beginning to dip toward the jagged line of mountains in the west, bleeding orange and gold across the sky. Levi kept his gaze fixed ahead, his mind turning over the possible routes, which trails would keep them hidden, which waterholes were still dependable in this dry stretch of land. Behind him, he could feel the rigid tension in her body. She sat straight, her shoulders stiff, every muscle coiled like a bowstring. When the gelding shifted over uneven ground, she didn't grab for him, didn't lean back for support. She held herself steady with the same fierce independence she'd shown on that platform. Finally, as they crested a ridge, Levi reined the horse to a halt. Below them lay a shallow arroyo, a sliver of shade cutting through the desert. He swung down and offered his hand to her, but she ignored it, sliding from the saddle on her own. She stood a few paces away, her eyes scanning the horizon as if she expected trouble to come riding hard after them. Levi untied his canteen and tossed it toward her. She caught it without breaking her gaze from the open land, then lifted it. To her lips, she drank sparingly, just enough to wet her throat, and handed it back. You got a name? Levi asked, his voice low, almost casual. She stared at him for a long moment before answering. Nelly. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the faint music of her people's language beneath the English. Well, Nelly, we're headed west. There's a place where you can be safe. Her eyes narrowed. Safe from you. He let out a short, humorless chuckle. Safe from the men who'd have bought you for less honorable reasons. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. And what are your reasons? Levi busied himself with loosening the gelding's cinch, not meeting her gaze. Don't matter what I tell you. You wouldn't believe me. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant cry of a hawk. Finally, she said, you paid too much for me. No man does that without wanting something in return. He met her eyes then, and there was something sharp in his stare, something that told her he didn't take kindly to being lumped in with the men back at the auction. You're right, he said. I do want something. I want you to live. Nelly's expression didn't soften, but a flicker of uncertainty passed through her eyes. She didn't answer, only turned away and walked toward the shade of the arroyo. Levi followed at a distance, giving her space. He set down his saddlebag and began pulling out what little food he had. A strip of dried beef, a heel of bread. He offered her a share, and though she hesitated, she took it. As they ate in the quiet, the heat of the day began to fade, replaced by the cooler breath of evening. Shadows stretched long across the sand, and Levi knew they'd need to make camp before darkness swallowed the dessert. He led the gelding to a patch of scrub where it could graze, then began gathering wood for a small fire. When he returned, Nelly was sitting cross-legged on the ground, watching him with the same guarded expression. The firelight, once it caught, painted her features in warm gold, softening the defiance in her face. You could have left me there, she said suddenly. I could have. Levi agreed. Why didn't you? He paused, considering his answer. Because I've seen what happens to women in those situations, and because I'm tired of riding past trouble and pretending it's none of mine. For the first time, something like understanding passed between them, though it was fleeting. She looked away, her fingers idly tracing patterns in the dust. They said nothing more that night. When Levi lay down near the fire, he kept his hand close to his revolver, not out of mistrust for her, but for the dangers that roamed the desert. Under moonlight, he knew she wouldn't sleep easy either. Tomorrow, the real test would begin, crossing a stretch of land where the law held no sway, and where the men who had lost the auction might just decide to come looking for what they believed was still theirs. They broke camp before dawn, the fire snuffed out to leave no trace. The sky a pale wash of silver just beginning to warm with the coming sun. Levi kept them moving at a steady pace, taking narrow, twisting trails through the low hills, avoiding the open flats where riders could spot them from miles away. Nelly didn't speak, but she stayed close, her sharp eyes sweeping the horizon like a hawk searching for movement. By mid-morning, the wind shifted. Levi noticed it first. The faint taste of dust on the air, the rhythm of the desert gone. Still, he reined in the gelding, tilting his head to listen. There it was, the distant thud of hooves, faint but growing. He glanced back at Nelly. She'd heard it too. Her jaw tightened, and she instinctively moved toward a cluster of boulders. Her body crouched low. Levi's mind worked fast. The sound was coming from behind, which meant they'd either been tracked or someone had spotted them at a distance. Either way, running would just draw them out into the open. He guided Nelly toward the rocks, tethering the gelding in a narrow cleft where it would be hidden, then checked the revolver at his hip. The riders came into view not long after, 3 of them, dust-coated and mean-looking, the kind of men who'd lost a bidding war and decided to settle it by force. Levi recognized the tall one in front, Barrett Kane, a man with a taste for cruelty and a history of getting what he wanted. Well now, Kane called out as he slowed his horse, his grin twisting under his thick mustache. Ain't this a sight? Thought you could just walk off with my property, Levi. She ain't your property, Levi said evenly, stepping out from the rocks so they could see him, but keeping himself between them and Nelly. Kane chuckled, glancing at the 2 men flanking him. Pretty words, but I paid for the right to own her, and I aim to collect. His eyes slid toward the shadows where Nelly stood. Come on out, sweetheart. Make it easy on yourself. Nelly didn't move. Her face was set. Her gaze locked on Kane with a hatred that burned hotter than the desert sun. Levi shifted his stance, his voice hardening. You turn around now, Kane, and this ends here. Push it, and I'll put you in the ground. The laughter from Kane's men was short and ugly. Kane leaned forward in his saddle. You always thought you were some kind of hero, Levi. But heroes die just as easy as anyone else. He gave a sharp nod, and his men started forward. Levi didn't wait. His revolver was out and barking fire before the first man's boot hit the ground. One dropped instantly, clutching his shoulder and howling. The second tried to draw, but Levi's shot shattered the air again, sending the man scrambling for cover. Kane wheeled his horse, drawing his own pistol, but a rock from Nelly's hand struck him square across the temple. He cursed, swaying, and Levi charged forward, knocking him clean out of the saddle. The fight was quick and brutal. When the dust settled, Kane's men were retreating, dragging the wounded one with them. Kane lay on the ground, groaning, his pistol kicked far from reach. Levi stood over him, breathing hard, his revolver steady. This is your only warning, Levi said, his voice like gravel. Next time I see you, I won't leave you breathing. Kane spat into the dust but said nothing. Levi stepped back, keeping his gun trained until the remaining riders disappeared over the rise. When he turned, Nelly was watching him, not with fear, but with something deeper, something he couldn't quite read. She stepped toward him slowly, her eyes locked on his. You risked your life, she said quietly. Levi holstered his gun, shrugging as if it were nothing seemed worth the trouble. For the first time since they met, her expression softened. She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm, a small, hesitant gesture, but it was enough to send a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the desert heat. They still had miles to go, dangers ahead, but in that moment, Levi knew something had changed. The cold, empty stretch of land around them felt just a little less lonely.